Some questions should never be asked. They hang in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Impossible to take back once spoken.
For Royal Guard Marcus Chen, that question would cost him everything he thought he knew about duty, honor, and the woman whose smile had been the brightest light in the palace corridors. It was a Tuesday morning when Princess Elena's laughter stopped echoing through the marble halls forever.
The same Tuesday when a loyal guard's curiosity would unravel secrets that had been buried deeper than the ancient foundations of the royal castle itself. What happens when the person sworn to protect you becomes the one person you can never trust again?
What happens when a single question destroys not just a smile but an entire kingdom's carefully constructed lie? This is the story of how truth became the most dangerous weapon of all.
Marcus Chen had been a royal guard for 7 years, but he had never seen Princess Elena cry until that Tuesday morning in March. The sight of her tears falling onto the pristine white marble floor of the East Wing corridor would haunt him for the rest of his life. He had been making his routine patrol when he heard the sound, not quite sobbing, but something raw and broken that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Following the sound, he found her sitting in the window alcove that overlooked the royal gardens, her usually perfect posture crumpled like a discarded letter. The Princess Elena that Marcus knew was sunshine personified. She had a way of lighting up every room she entered, her infectious laughter echoing through the palace halls like music. She remembered every guard's name, asked about their families, and somehow managed to make even the most mundane palace duties feel important. Her smile had become as much a part of the palace architecture as the ancient stone columns and golden chandeliers. But that morning there was no trace of that radiant woman. Instead, Marcus saw someone who looked utterly defeated, staring out at the gardens with empty eyes that seemed to see nothing at all.
"Your Highness," he said quietly, approaching with the careful steps of someone who knew that even good intentions could shatter something already broken. "Are you all right?" Elena looked up at him, and Marcus felt his heart clench.
Her face was pale, her usually bright green eyes rimmed with red. She attempted a smile, that automatic, practiced expression she had perfected over years of public appearances, but it faltered before it could fully form.
"Oh, Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, I'm fine.
Just tired, I suppose." Marcus had been trained to observe, to notice details that others might miss. It was what made him good at his job. He noticed the way Elena's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. He noticed the crumpled piece of paper she tried to hide beneath her silk shawl. He noticed that she had been crying for longer than just a few minutes. Her eyes had that particular puffiness that came from sustained tears. Most importantly, he noticed that this was the first time Princess Elena had ever lied to him. In 7 years of service, she had always been honest with the palace staff. When she was frustrated with court politics, she said so. When she was excited about a charity event, her enthusiasm was genuine and boundless. When she was nervous before a public speech, she admitted it freely. Her authenticity was one of the things that made her beloved, not just by the people of the kingdom, but by everyone who worked within the palace walls. But now she was lying, and Marcus could see the effort it took for her to maintain even that fragile deception. "Would you like me to call for your ladies in waiting?" he offered gently.
"Or perhaps I could ask the kitchen to prepare some of that chamomile tea you enjoy?" Elena shook her head quickly, almost frantically. "No, please, I just need a moment alone. Could you perhaps delay your patrol of this section, just for a little while?" This request struck Marcus as odd. The royal family never asked for deviations from security protocols. They understood that their safety depended on rigid adherence to established routines. The fact that Elena was asking for time alone, away from any form of protection, sent warning signals through his mind. "Your Highness, I'm not sure that would be wise. Perhaps if you'd like privacy, you could return to your private chambers. I could ensure that corridor remains clear for you." "No," Elena said, her voice carrying a sharp edge of panic that she quickly tried to soften. "No, I can't go back there right now. Please, Marcus, I've never asked you for anything before. I just need 30 minutes here. Alone. I promise I won't move from this spot." Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. His duty was clear: never leave a member of the royal family unprotected. But Elena's distress was so evident, her pleas so genuine, that he felt torn between his professional obligations and his human compassion. Looking at her now, Marcus realized he had been noticing changes in the princess for weeks. Her smile had been appearing less frequently. She had been quieter during public engagements. He had caught her staring off into space during court functions, her mind clearly elsewhere. At the time, he had attributed it to the stress of her upcoming 25th birthday celebration.
a massive affair that would involve dignitaries from across the continent. But now, seeing her like this, Marcus understood that whatever was troubling Princess Elena went much deeper than party planning stress. 30 minutes, he agreed, finally. But I'll be positioned at the end of the corridor. If you need anything at all, just call out. Elena's relief was palpable. Thank you, Marcus. You don't know what this means to me. As he walked away, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of positioning himself at the far end of the corridor as promised, he stopped just around the corner, close enough to hear if Elena called for help, but hidden from her view. It wasn't spying, he told himself. Was ensuring her safety while respecting her need for privacy. What he heard in those 30 minutes would shake his understanding of everything he thought he knew about the royal family. At first there was silence, then the sound of paper rustling. Elena was reading something, presumably the document she had been hiding. After a few minutes she began to speak, but not to anyone present. She was talking to herself, working through whatever information she had received. How could they think I wouldn't find out? Her voice drifted around the corner, thick with hurt and anger. 25 years of lies, 25 years of living, a complete fabrication. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Whatever Elena had discovered, it was significant enough to shatter her entire worldview. The marriage contract was signed before I was even born, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. A political alliance disguised as love, and the charity work, all of it designed to make me more appealing to the Valdorian court. Every cause I've supported, every passion I thought was my own, it was all orchestrated. Valdoria. Marcus knew that kingdom well. It was their neighboring country, currently ruled by King Ferdinand and his son, Prince Rodrigo. There had been rumors for months about potential marriage negotiations between Elena and Prince Rodrigo, but the royal family had consistently denied any formal arrangements. Apparently, those denials had been lies. They've been grooming me my entire life for this marriage. Elena's voice broke slightly, teaching me Valdorian customs, encouraging my interest in their literature and arts, guiding my charitable work toward causes that would appeal to their court. And I thought it was all my choice. I thought I was following my own interests. Marcus closed his eyes, beginning to understand the depth of Elena's betrayal. She had always been proud of her independence, her ability to choose her own path within the constraints of royal duty. To discover that even her personal interests had been manipulated must have felt like losing herself entirely. The letter says the engagement announcement will be made at my birthday celebration next month, in front of the entire kingdom. They expect me to smile and act surprised, as if this is wonderful news instead of the end of my life as I know it. The 30 minutes passed, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to return. Elena's quiet sobs had resumed, interspersed with occasional angry whispers about duty and sacrifice and the prison of royal blood. When she finally stood to leave, Marcus quickly moved to his promised position at the end of the corridor. Elena approached him with her face composed, that practiced smile back in place, though it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for the privacy, Marcus. I feel much better now. Another lie. But this time Marcus understood why she felt the need to tell it. Over the following days, Marcus watched Elena carefully. She maintained her royal duties with mechanical precision. But the joy that had always characterized her public appearances was gone. She smiled when expected, laughed at appropriate moments, and spoke with her usual grace, but Marcus could see the performance in it now. The real Elena, the one he had glimpsed in that corridor, seemed to have retreated somewhere deep inside, hidden behind layers of royal protocol and expected behavior. Marcus found himself studying other members of the royal family with new eyes. King Charles and Queen Isabella carried on as usual, but now Marcus noticed the meaningful glances they exchanged when Elena entered a room. He observed how they steered conversations away from certain topics, how they seemed to be watching their daughter for signs of, what? Rebellion? Suspicion? The palace staff too seemed different when viewed through this new lens of awareness. The head cook had always been careful to include Valdorian dishes in Elena's meals, which Marcus had previously thought was simply good hospitality in case of visiting dignitaries. The language tutor who had worked with Elena since childhood had always emphasized her Valdorian vocabulary, which had seemed like thorough education at the time. Now Marcus realized that every aspect of Elena's life had been shaped by a destiny that had been decided before her first breath. 3 weeks after that morning in the corridor, Marcus was assigned to escort Elena to a charity gala. As they rode in the royal carriage, he found himself studying her profile in the lamplight. She was staring out the window at the city streets, her expression thoughtful and sad. Your Highness, he said carefully, may I ask you something? Elena turned to him with surprise. In 7 years, their interactions had always been professional, pleasant but formal. Personal questions were not part of their dynamic.
Of course, Marcus. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you hadn't been born into the royal family? It was an innocent enough question, the kind of philosophical wondering that anyone might have.
But in the context of what Marcus knew, it carried deeper implications. Elena's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Marcus saw a flash of the raw pain he had witnessed in the corridor. But she composed herself quickly. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, though I try not to dwell on impossible things. We all have the life we're given, don't we? The important thing is to make the best of it.
But what if the life you're given isn't really yours? Marcus asked, pushing gently. What if every choice, every passion, every dream has been shaped by other people's expectations? Elena's hands, folded carefully in her lap, began to tremble slightly.
She stared at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read: surprise, fear, hope, and something else he couldn't identify. Why are you asking me this? She whispered. Marcus realized he had reached a crossroads. He could retreat into safe, professional distance, pretending he knew nothing about her situation.
Or he could take a step that might cost him his position, but could offer Elena something she desperately needed, someone who knew the truth and was willing to acknowledge it. Because, he said quietly, I think everyone deserves to have at least one person in their life who sees them for who they really are, not who they're supposed to be. Elena's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Tears began to flow down her cheeks, and she made no effort to stop them.
You know, she said simply. I know. How long? Since the morning I found you crying in the East Wing. Elena nodded, accepting this without question.
They sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the rhythm of the carriage wheels on cobblestone. What am I supposed to do, Marcus? She finally asked.
How do I live with the knowledge that nothing about my life has been real? How do I go to that birthday celebration and smile while they announce my engagement to a man I've never met for the sake of a political alliance I never agreed to? Marcus wished he had answers for her.
But he was just a guard trained to protect bodies, not hearts.
I don't know, Your Highness. But I think the first step is deciding what you want, regardless of what others expect from you.
And what if what I want is impossible? Then at least you'll know what you're fighting for. The carriage pulled up to the gala venue, and Elena quickly composed herself, dabbing at her tears with a silk handkerchief. Before stepping out, she turned to Marcus one more time.
Thank you, she said, for seeing me, really seeing me. I had forgotten what that felt like. As Marcus watched Elena glide into the gala, every inch the perfect princess, he realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. She was no longer just his charge to protect. She had become a person whose happiness mattered to him in ways that went far beyond professional duty. That night, as he lay in his quarters reviewing the evening's events, Marcus made a decision that would prove to be either the bravest or most foolish thing he had ever done.
He was going to help Princess Elena find a way to reclaim her life. The next morning, Marcus began his own quiet investigation into the royal family's arrangements with Valdoria. Using his security clearance, in his knowledge of the palace's hidden passages, he started gathering information that could give Elena the power to make truly informed decisions about her future. What he discovered would be far more shocking than even Elena suspected, and it would put both of their lives in danger. Marcus discovered that the palace held secrets in places he had never imagined. After 2 weeks of careful investigation, he had learned to navigate the network of hidden passages that ran through the castle walls like arteries through a body. These passages had been built centuries ago for servants to move unseen, but they had evolved into something far more useful for anyone seeking information. The first major breakthrough came when Marcus overheard a private conversation between King Charles and his chief advisor, Lord Wellington. Hidden in a passage that ran behind the king's private study, Marcus listened as they discussed details that made Elena's situation far more complex than a simple arranged marriage. The Valdorian terms have changed again, Lord Wellington was saying, his voice tight with concern. Prince Rodrigo is demanding immediate consummation of the marriage upon the engagement announcement.
He's not willing to wait for a traditional courtship period. King Charles's response chilled Marcus to the bone. Then Elena will have to adjust her expectations.
The alliance is too important to risk over romantic nonsense. We need Valdoria's military support before the northern rebellions spread further south.
And if she refuses, she won't refuse. She's been raised to understand duty. Besides, once the announcement is made publicly, she'll have no choice but to comply. The kingdom's reputation depends on it.
Marcus pressed closer to the wall,
his heart pounding as he realized the full scope of the trap Elena was walking into. This wasn't just about an arranged marriage. It was about using her as a political pawn in a dangerous game of international alliances. "What about the other matter?" Lord Wellington asked quietly. "The investigation into Elena's activities. It's being handled discreetly. If she's been sharing information with anyone outside the approved channels, we'll know soon enough." Marcus felt ice run through his veins. They were investigating Elena. But for what? What information could she possibly have shared, and with whom? "Sir Marcus Chen's name has come up," Lord Wellington continued. "He's been Elena's primary escort for several recent events, and his security clearance gives him access to sensitive areas of the palace." "Marcus has been loyal for 7 years," King Charles replied, though his tone carried a note of uncertainty. "But loyalty can be tested when emotions become involved. Have him watched, but don't take any action yet. We can't afford to create suspicion so close to the birthday celebration." Marcus's blood ran cold. They knew something. Perhaps not the full extent of his knowledge, but enough to consider him a potential threat. He realized that his investigation had to accelerate. But he also had to be even more careful. Over the next few days, Marcus used his legitimate patrol routes to map out a more complete picture of the political situation surrounding Elena's engagement. What he discovered painted a troubling portrait of a kingdom in crisis. The northern rebellions that King Charles had mentioned were more serious than the public knew. 3 provinces had declared independence, and their rebel forces were being supplied by Calum, Valdoria's historic enemy. The royal army had been struggling to contain the uprising, and resources were running dangerously low. Valdoria had offered military support, but only in exchange for a formal alliance sealed by marriage between Prince Rodrigo and Princess Elena. The marriage contract included clauses that would give Valdoria significant influence over the kingdom's foreign policy and trade agreements. Marcus began to understand that Elena wasn't just being forced into an unwanted marriage. She was being sacrificed to prevent a civil war. But the deeper he dug, the more troubling details he uncovered. Prince Rodrigo of Valdoria was not the honorable prince that palace propaganda portrayed. Marcus found correspondence hidden in the royal archives that painted a picture of a man with a reputation for cruelty, particularly toward women. 2 previous potential brides had withdrawn from negotiations with Valdoria, citing concerns about the prince's behavior. One had fled to a convent rather than proceed with the arranged marriage. The most disturbing discovery came when Marcus found medical reports hidden in Lord Wellington's private files. Elena had been receiving regular examinations by the court physician, ostensibly for routine health maintenance. But Marcus recognized the specific tests being conducted. They were fertility assessments designed to ensure that Elena could produce heirs quickly. Elena was being treated like breeding stock. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He had to tell Elena what he had learned, regardless of the risk to himself. Finding an opportunity proved more challenging than expected. Elena's schedule had become increasingly rigid as her birthday celebration approached, and Marcus noticed that she was now accompanied by additional guards during her public appearances. Her private time had been severely restricted. Marcus finally found his chance during a morning when Elena was scheduled to visit the palace library for what was officially described as research for her birthday speech. He had volunteered for library security duty, knowing that the vast collection of books would provide cover for private conversation. When Elena entered the library, Marcus could immediately see the toll that the past weeks had taken on her. She had lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of cosmetics could fully conceal. Her smile had become so mechanical that it looked painful. "Your Highness," Marcus said formally, approaching her with a stack of books that he had prepared as a prop. "I've gathered some historical texts that might be relevant to your research." Elena looked up at him, and Marcus saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She understood that this was more than a routine interaction. "Thank you, Marcus. Perhaps you could help me locate some specific materials. I'm looking for information about historical precedents for difficult royal decisions." She was being careful with her words, aware that even in the library they might be overheard. Marcus nodded and guided her toward a section of the library that was separated from the main reading area by tall shelves. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "I need to tell you some things that you should know before your birthday celebration." Elena's face went pale. "You've learned something else." "Several things, and they're worse than you might expect." Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus shared everything he had discovered. He told her about Prince Rodrigo's reputation, about the clauses in the marriage contract that would essentially hand over control of their kingdom to Valdoria, about the northern rebellions and the desperate political situation that was driving her parents' decisions. Elena listened in silence, her face growing increasingly pale with each revelation. When Marcus finished, She was gripping the edge of a reading table so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. "The medical examinations," she whispered. I wondered why they had become so frequent and so specific. I thought it was just increased attention to my health before the celebration. "There's more," Marcus said reluctantly. "They're investigating both of us. They suspect that you might be sharing sensitive information, and they're watching me because of my proximity to you." Elena's eyes widened with fear. "Marcus, if they think you're involved in some kind of conspiracy, I know the risks," Marcus replied quietly. "But I couldn't let you walk into this situation without understanding what you're really facing." Elena stood abruptly and began pacing between the shelves. Her royal composure had completely dissolved, replaced by raw panic and anger. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" she demanded, her voice rising before she caught herself and lowered it to a whisper. "I can't refuse the engagement without causing a civil war. I can't run away without abandoning my people to violence. And now I discover that my future husband is a monster and my parents are willing to sell me to him like cattle." Marcus had been thinking about this dilemma since he first began his investigation. "There might be another option," he said carefully. Elena stopped pacing and stared at him. "What do you mean? What if there was a way to expose the truth about Prince Rodrigo before the engagement announcement? If the people of Valdoria knew what kind of man their prince really was, it might force their king to reconsider the alliance terms." "That would be incredibly dangerous," Elena replied. "If we were caught trying to sabotage the alliance, the risk might be worth it. If it saves you from a life of misery and saves the kingdom from Valdorian control." Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering this possibility. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger than Marcus had heard it in weeks. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "I've been working on this for the past few days. There's a journalist in the capital city who specializes in international politics. She's known for her integrity and her ability to verify sources. If we could provide her with documented evidence about Prince Rodrigo's behavior, the evidence would have to be irrefutable," Elena interrupted, "and it would have to come from Valdoria itself. Anything originating from our kingdom would be dismissed as propaganda. I know. But I think there might be a way to get that evidence." Marcus explained his plan. It was risky, and would require Elena to use her royal connections in ways that could be seen as treasonous. But it might also be their only chance to prevent what amounted to Elena's destruction and their kingdom's subjugation. The plan involved Elena using her access to diplomatic correspondence to gather evidence about Prince Rodrigo from Valdorian sources. Marcus would use his knowledge of the palace's security systems to help her access files that were normally beyond her reach. Together, they would build a case that could be presented to the journalist in a way that would protect Elena's involvement. "If we do this," Elena said slowly, "there's no going back. Even if we succeed in stopping the engagement, my relationship with my parents will never recover. They'll never trust me again. And if we're caught," Marcus added, "we'll both face charges of treason." Elena looked at him with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with sorrow. "Why are you willing to risk so much for me, Marcus? You could lose everything." Marcus had been asking himself the same question for days. The answer was complicated, involving duty and compassion and something deeper that he didn't want to examine too closely. "Because everyone deserves the chance to choose their own life," he said simply. "And because I've seen what you're like when you're genuinely happy. The kingdom deserves to have that person as their princess, not the broken shell that this marriage would leave behind." Elena reached out and touched Marcus's hand briefly, a gesture that violated every protocol of royal interaction but felt entirely natural in the moment. "Then we do it," she said. "But Marcus, if we're discovered, I want you to tell them that you are following my orders." "I won't let you be punished for helping me." "That won't be necessary," Marcus replied. "Because we're not going to be discovered." But even as he said the words, Marcus felt a chill of premonition. Their enemies were more numerous and more powerful than they realized, and the consequences of failure would be far more severe than either of them imagined. That night, Elena and Marcus began their covert mission to expose Prince Rodrigo and save her from a fate worse than death. What they uncovered in their investigation would shake the foundations of both kingdoms and put their lives in mortal danger. The first phase of their plan required Elena to access her father's private correspondence with the Valdorian court. Using Marcus's knowledge of the palace's security rotations, Elena was able to enter the king's private study during a window when she wouldn't be observed. What she found there exceeded their worst fears about Prince Rodrigo, but it also revealed a web of political corruption and international conspiracy that went far beyond a simple marriage alliance. Hidden in the king's files were medical reports about Prince Rodrigo's previous fiancées. One had been hospitalized with suspicious injuries shortly before her withdrawal from the engagement. Another had died under mysterious circumstances after making public statements about the prince's character.
But the most shocking discovery was a series of letters from King Ferdinand of Valdoria to Elena's father. The letters revealed that the marriage alliance was only the first step in a larger plan for Valdoria to absorb their entire kingdom through a series of political and economic maneuvers.
Elena was not just being sacrificed for a temporary alliance, she was being used as the key to her own kingdom's destruction.
As Elena photographed the documents with a small camera that Marcus had procured, she felt a strange sense of liberation mixed with terror. For the first time in her life, she was taking action based on her own choices rather than following a predetermined path.
But she was also acutely aware that discovery would mean not just personal ruin but possibly death. The evidence they gathered was more than sufficient to destroy Prince Rodrigo's reputation and expose the conspiracy between the two kingdoms.
But getting it to the journalists safely and ensuring that Elena's involvement remained hidden would require a level of deception and risk that neither of them had ever attempted. As Elena left her father's study with the incriminating documents hidden in her clothing, she caught sight of herself in a mirror.
For the first time in weeks, she looked alive again. Her eyes held purpose, and there was color in her cheeks. She was no longer just a princess waiting passively for her fate to be decided. She had become someone fighting for her own survival and the survival of her people. But she was also about to discover that her enemies had been watching more carefully than she realized, and that her actions had triggered a response that would put both her life and Marcus's life in immediate danger. The trap closed around them with terrifying precision. 3 days after Elena had photographed the documents in her father's study, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the palace routine that set every one of his professional instincts on high alert. Guards who had worked the same shifts for years were suddenly being reassigned.
Security protocols that had been standard for decades were quietly modified. Most troubling of all, Marcus discovered that his own clearance levels had been discreetly reduced, limiting his access to areas of the palace he had freely entered for 7 years.
They knew something. The question was how much. Elena, meanwhile, was experiencing her own version of increased surveillance. Waiting. The approaching birthday celebration of validations and cases. They had absolutely been waiting.
Most ominously, Elena noticed that her father had begun looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Disappointment mixed with suspicion and something that looked almost like fear. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week before Elena's birthday celebration. Marcus was conducting his routine patrol of the East Wing when he was approached by Lord Wellington and Captain Harrison, the head of palace security. The grim expressions on their faces told Marcus everything he needed to know before they spoke a single word.
"Sir Marcus," Lord Wellington said formally, "you are requested to attend a private meeting with His Majesty immediately." The use of requested was a polite fiction. Marcus understood that he was being summoned to answer for crimes he hadn't yet been formally accused of committing.
"Of course, my lord," Marcus replied, maintaining his professional composure despite the fear that was clawing at his chest. "Shall I report to the king's study?" "You will report to the interrogation chamber in the lower levels," Captain Harrison said curtly. "Your weapons, please." Marcus had been in the interrogation chamber exactly twice during his 7 years of service, both times as backup security while suspected criminals were questioned. The stone room was designed to be intimidating, with no windows and heavy wooden furniture that seemed to absorb sound.
As he descended the stone steps, Marcus realized that Elena would have no way of knowing what had happened to him.
She would be expecting him to make contact later that day to finalize their plans for delivering the evidence to the journalist. King Charles was waiting in the interrogation chamber, accompanied by Lord Wellington and 2 guards that Marcus didn't recognize.
The king's face was a mask of cold fury that made him look like a stranger.
7 years of loyal service, King Charles began without preamble, and this is how you repay the trust of the crown. Your Majesty, Marcus replied carefully, I'm not certain what you're referring to.
Don't compound your betrayal with lies, the king snapped.
We know about your unauthorized investigation into royal correspondence. We know about your manipulation of security protocols to access restricted areas.
And we know about your involvement in compromising the security of sensitive diplomatic documents. Marcus felt his heart sink, but he maintained his composure. I have never compromised any diplomatic security, Your Majesty. My access to restricted areas has always been within the scope of my duties. Your duties, Lord Wellington interjected, do not include investigating private royal communications or influencing Princess Elena's behavior regarding matters of state.
The mention of Elena sent a spike of panic through Marcus's chest.
How much did they know about her involvement? Princess Elena has never been influenced by me in any way, my lord. I have always maintained appropriate professional boundaries. King Charles leaned forward, his eyes blazing with anger. We have testimony that you have been engaging in inappropriate personal conversations with the princess. We have evidence that you have used your position to gain her trust in order to extract sensitive information. Marcus realized they were twisting the truth to fit a narrative that painted him as a manipulative traitor who had taken advantage of Elena's emotional vulnerability. It was a clever strategy that would protect Elena by making her appear to be a victim of Marcus's deception rather than a willing participant in their investigation, but it also meant that Marcus would bear the full weight of punishment for their actions. Your Majesty, Marcus said quietly, I have never extracted any information from Princess Elena, nor have I used her in any way. Our conversations have been brief and entirely appropriate. Then explain this, Lord Wellington said, placing a familiar-looking document on the table. Marcus's blood turned to ice. It was one of the photographs Elena had taken in her father's study, printed on paper and obviously recovered from somewhere. But how had they gotten it? I've never seen this document before, Marcus said, which was technically true since he had never seen the printed version. It was found in your quarters this morning during a routine security inspection, Captain Harrison announced. Marcus stared at the captain in shock. That's impossible. I've never had that document in my possession. Are you suggesting that palace security is lying? King Charles asked dangerously. Marcus realized he was trapped. The document had obviously been planted in his quarters to provide evidence of his guilt. Denying it would only make him appear more deceptive, but admitting to having it would confirm their accusations. Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, I cannot explain how that document came to be in my quarters, because I did not place it there. Perhaps, Lord Wellington suggested, it was given to you by someone who had access to the king's private study. Someone you had convinced to betray her family and her kingdom. The implication was clear. They were accusing Elena of stealing the documents and giving them to Marcus. It was a narrative that protected Elena's reputation while ensuring that Marcus would face the harshest possible punishment. Marcus made a decision that would save Elena's life but destroy his own. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I confess to unauthorized investigation of royal communications and to accessing restricted areas beyond my authority. I take full responsibility for these actions. King Charles studied Marcus with an expression of contempt mixed with something that might have been disappointment. And the princess? What was her role in your betrayal? Princess Elena had no knowledge of my actions, Marcus said firmly. She was never involved in any capacity. If she appeared to be cooperating with me, it was because I deceived her about my intentions and my authority. You're claiming you manipulated my daughter? I'm claiming that I used her trust in me to gain information that I was not authorized to have. She believed she was helping with legitimate security concerns. It was the most elegant lie Marcus had ever told, and he could see that it was exactly what King Charles needed to hear. It painted Elena as an innocent victim while providing a clear target for royal retribution. Lord Wellington leaned forward with predatory satisfaction. The penalty for treason is death, Sir Marcus. Are you prepared to accept that consequence for your actions? Marcus had known this moment would come from the instant he decided to help Elena. He had hoped they might find a way to expose the truth without personal consequences, but he had always understood the real cost of failure. I understand the penalty, my lord. However, King Charles said slowly, we are prepared to offer you an alternative given your years of service and the delicate nature of the political situation. Marcus looked up with surprise. He had expected immediate execution or imprisonment. Exile, the king continued. Permanent banishment from the kingdom, effective immediately. You will be escorted to the border and warned never to return. In exchange, this matter will be handled discreetly, without public trial or execution. Marcus understood the offer. The royal family couldn't afford the scandal of a public treason trial so close to Elena's birthday celebration. Executing him quietly would raise questions, but exile could be explained as a voluntary departure for personal reasons. There is one additional condition, Lord Wellington added. You will never attempt to contact any member of the royal family, including Princess Elena. Any such contact will be considered an act of war and will result in immediate death. Unquote. Close quote. Marcus nodded. The terms were better than he had expected, though the prohibition against contacting Elena felt like a knife through his heart.
I accept your terms, Your Majesty. You have 1 hour to gather your personal belongings. You will be escorted from the palace immediately afterward.
As Marcus was led back to his quarters under guard, his mind was racing with concern for Elena. She would be expecting to hear from him about their plans to deliver the evidence to the journalist. When he failed to appear, she would either assume the worst or take dangerous risks trying to find out what had happened to him. But there was nothing he could do to warn her. Any attempt to make contact would only expose her to greater suspicion and potentially result in his death. Marcus gathered his few belongings quickly. His mind focused on Elena's situation rather than his own loss. The evidence they had gathered about Prince Rodrigo was still crucial, but Elena would have to find a way to use it without his help. As he was being escorted toward the palace gates, Marcus caught sight of Elena in the distance. She was standing in the garden, speaking with one of her ladies-in-waiting, looking elegant and composed in the morning sunlight. She glanced in his direction, and for a moment their eyes met across the courtyard.
Marcus saw confusion and alarm flash across her face as she noticed his escort and realized that something was terribly wrong. Marcus gave her the slightest nod, not enough to be noticed by his guards, but sufficient to let her know that she should be careful.
Then he was through the gates and walking away from the palace for the last time. The 3-day journey to the border gave Marcus time to think about Elena's situation and to hope that she would find a way to use the evidence they had gathered. The birthday celebration was only 4 days away, and the engagement announcement would destroy Elena's life if she couldn't find a way to stop it. But Elena, meanwhile, was dealing with her own crisis. Marcus's sudden disappearance had confirmed her worst fears about their discovery. When discreet inquiries revealed that he had been exiled for treason, Elena realized that she was now completely alone in her fight against the arranged marriage. Worse, she discovered that her own activities were being watched even more closely. Her access to her father's study had been eliminated, and her movements throughout the palace were being tracked with precision that made any covert activity impossible. But Elena had learned something important from her partnership with Marcus. She had discovered that she was capable of courage and determination that went far beyond what anyone expected from her. The frightened, compliant princess who had cried in the corridor was gone, replaced by someone who was prepared to fight for her own survival. On the evening before her birthday celebration, Elena made a decision that surprised even herself. She would not wait passively for the engagement announcement. She would not allow herself to be used as a political pawn, and she would not let Marcus's sacrifice be meaningless. Elena had realized that she possessed one weapon that no one could take away from her: her public voice. The birthday celebration would be attended by hundreds of nobles, dignitaries, and representatives from across the continent. The engagement announcement would be broadcast to the entire kingdom. It would be the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth about Prince Rodrigo and the conspiracy between the two kingdoms. Elena knew that speaking out would almost certainly result in her death or imprisonment. But she also knew that remaining silent would result in something worse than death: the destruction of her soul and the enslavement of her people. On the morning of her 25th birthday, Princess Elena began preparing for the most important performance of her life. She would smile and play her role perfectly until the moment came for the engagement announcement, and then she would tell the truth. That would either save her kingdom or destroy her. The birthday celebration was everything the royal family had promised: a magnificent display of wealth and power designed to impress foreign dignitaries and reinforce the stability of the monarchy. Elena moved through the crowds with practiced grace, accepting congratulations and making appropriate small talk, while inside she felt like she was preparing for battle. Prince Rodrigo had arrived that morning with a delegation from Valdoria. Elena's first sight of her intended husband confirmed her worst fears. He was handsome enough, but there was something cold and predatory in his eyes that made her skin crawl. When he kissed her hand in greeting, she had to resist the urge to snatch it away. "Your Highness," he said in accented English, "you are even more lovely than your portrait suggested. I look forward to our announcement this evening." Elena managed to smile and nod appropriately, but inside she felt sick. This man expected to own her in a few hours, and he clearly viewed her as a prize he had already won. As the evening progressed and the moment for the announcement approached, Elena felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She had made her choice, and she was at peace with the consequences. When King Charles rose to address the assembly, Elena positioned herself where she would be visible to the entire crowd and to the cameras that would broadcast the announcement across the kingdom. "My friends," King Charles began, "tonight we celebrate not only my daughter's birthday, but also a joyous announcement that will strengthen the bonds between our kingdom and our dear allies in Valdoria. Elena stood perfectly still, her practiced smile in place as her father continued his prepared speech about political alliances and mutual cooperation. "No!" "It gives me great pleasure," King Charles announced, to announce the engagement of Princess Elena to Prince Rodrigo of Valdoria.
The wedding will take place in 3 months, cementing a partnership that will bring prosperity and security to both our peoples. The crowd erupted in applause, and cameras flashed as Elena was expected to step forward and graciously accept Prince Rodrigo's proposal.
Instead, Elena walked to the microphone that had been set up for her acceptance speech. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this important day," she began, her voice clear and strong.
"But before I accept this proposal, I think the people of both kingdoms deserve to know the truth about what this marriage really represents." The crowd fell silent, and Elena could see her father's face turning pale with shock and anger. "This is not a love match," Elena continued calmly.
"This is a political transaction designed to give Valdoria control over our kingdom. The marriage contract includes provisions that would essentially hand over our sovereignty to a foreign power."
Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Elena could see palace guards moving to stop her.
But she pressed on, knowing this was her only chance. Furthermore, Prince Rodrigo has a documented history of violence against women. His previous fiancées withdrew from engagements with him due to physical abuse, and one died under suspicious circumstances after making public statements about his character. Prince Rodrigo stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "This is outrageous slander," he declared. "I demand that this woman be silenced immediately." But Elena was not finished. "I refuse this engagement," she announced clearly. "I will not be used as a tool to destroy my own kingdom, and I will not be sacrificed to a man who views women as property to be abused."
The crowd erupted in chaos.
Some nobles shouted their support for Elena's courage, while others demanded that she be arrested for treason. Palace guards surrounded her, but Elena noticed that several of them seemed reluctant to lay hands on her. As she was led away from the microphone, Elena caught sight of something that made her heart leap with hope. In the crowd she saw faces that were not shocked or angry, but proud and determined. The people of her kingdom had heard the truth, and many of them were clearly prepared to support her. Elena had gambled everything on the hope that the truth would set her free. As she was escorted to the palace dungeons to await her fate, she realized that she had succeeded in ways she hadn't expected. For the first time in her life, she had acted according to her own conscience, rather than other people's expectations. She had found her voice and used it to protect both herself and her people. Whatever happened next, Elena knew that she had finally become the person she was meant to be. 3 days later, as news of Elena's revelations spread across both kingdoms, the political situation shifted dramatically. The people of Valdoria, horrified by the revelations about Prince Rodrigo, rose up in protest against their royal family. The northern rebellions in Elena's kingdom ended abruptly as rebel leaders realized that they had been manipulated by Valdorian agents. King Charles, faced with overwhelming popular support for his daughter's actions, was forced to announce that the engagement had been cancelled and that Elena would not be punished for speaking the truth. And somewhere across the border, in exile but free, Marcus heard the news and smiled for the first time since leaving the palace. Elena had found her strength and used it to save herself and her kingdom. Her smile had returned, brighter than ever before, because this time it was entirely her own. Her smile vanished that day, the question a royal guard finally asked.